There's a lot of things you can't affect about your church. I've been in ministry now 10 years full time, and there's been a lot of change. We've been a small church, we're now a large church, and we've had a lot of things change in between there. And I've noticed one thing, that there's a lot of things that you can't affect in your church. For instance, your music program. There's a lot of times you'll struggle. You won't have musicians that are good quality, or you won't have people that are very advanced singers. And it'll become very frustrating because your music program is not very good. And the reality is, most of the time, there's really not anything you can do to change it. Your finances are another one. In a small church, the constant battle is money. How do I pay my bills? How do we do this? All the things you'd like to do. And there's a lot of things that you can't affect, and your finances is really one of them. I know people say, well, preach on them, but rarely does that change your financial situation. And then finally, it's your facilities. A lot of times you're in a startup church or a small church. Maybe your facilities are just not adequate. Maybe you're in a small place, or maybe you've got run-down facilities, or maybe you're in a storefront. Maybe you're meeting in a school building, and you just can't affect your building. And a lot of these things are frustrating, because you want to grow your church, but you feel like, boy, if my music was better, my finances was better, my building was better, I could grow my church. But I want to say this to you, you can't affect those things, but there is one thing that you can affect, and that one thing that you can affect is your preaching. When your preaching is better, guests will come back. Getting that guest in there and preaching them a sermon that is relatable and something that speaks to them will bring them back. And today on this video, I want to talk to you about 5 things you can do this Sunday to be a better preacher and to preach a better sermon. And if you preach better sermons, people will come back. Number 1, the most important thing you've got to do, guys, and I tell younger preachers this, but I see older preachers, and when I say older, I mean people who've been in ministry longer. This is a mistake that they make, and the number 1 mistake they make is they preach way too long. You've got to realize the generation that we live in. You've got to realize the time that we live in. Many of us are accustomed to sitting through certain length classes in school our whole lives, and then we watch television that have commercial breaks every so often. We've gotten so bad that now we all watch Netflix so we can avoid the commercials, so that the show that we're watching can be even shorter than it already was. A 30-minute program now, I can watch it on Netflix in about 17 minutes. The reason it's important is because my attention span is very short, and so is your audience. And so the longer you preach, the more you lose your audience. They go away frustrated and aggravated that you preach too long. People tell me, but people need longer messages. And I'll say this to you. Jesus didn't preach very long. If you notice the Sermon on the Mount, if you read that, it's very short. And pastors, preachers, ministers, communicators, we've got to shorten the length of our sermon. If you shorten the length of your sermon, you'll have better results. People will leave there wanting more. And I think it's very important. Number 2, the second thing that most preachers struggle with is getting to the point. You got to be concise in your preaching. When somebody leaves your service, when they leave this Sunday, when they walk out of the door, if they were stopped 10 minutes later and asked, hey, what was that sermon about? Could they really name what your point was? And I know that a lot of people want to be deep. I know that we want to be comprehensive. But the truth is, you've got to get to the point. You've got to bring it all together so that the average listener who didn't go to seminary, who didn't go to Bible college, who's never taken a seminary course in his life, walks out the door and actually understands what you were talking about. Here's the truth. Too much information is almost as bad as no information if you don't bring them to the place to where they realize what in the world you're even talking about. And so I want to encourage you to get to the point. Bring it all the way back around. People say, well, I run rabbits and this and that. You can't do it. You got to shorten your message, and you got to get to the point. Number 3, and this is something that's a pet peeve of mine personally. It may not bother some people, but it bothers me, is don't read to me when you're preaching, when you're standing in the pulpit. You know, you have your manuscript and you may have it all wrote out because you think and you feel like it gives you a safety net. It gives you a blanket to fall to. You can look at that thing and you can know where you're at and you don't get lost. But I'm just going to tell you this. When you read to me, it's probably the worst thing in the world. Nothing's worse than sitting to a college class, a high school class, a service at church, anything where somebody is standing up and reading to you. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, just email it to me and I'll read it myself. Reading your sermon is terrible. Reading a message from front to back kills the mood, the spirit, and the engagement that I have. It kills it, and it kills your audience as well. Number 4, and this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but I think it's so important, and that is you've got to look good when you get in the pulpit. Now, I'm not saying you have to wear a suit and tie, and that's kind of the knock people get on when we say look good. People say, but I don't wear a suit and tie to preach in. And I understand there's people here watching this video, you're in traditional churches, you're in formal churches, you're in contemporary churches. Whatever setting you find yourself in, dress appropriately. So if you preach in a contemporary church, you're going to be in blue jeans and a t-shirt when you preach. Make sure that you got a sharp looking pair of blue jeans on. You got a sharp looking t-shirt on. You're in style, it fits you, and it looks good. That's all I'm saying. If you wear a suit, make sure you're in a suit that fits you. It's fitted. Make sure you wear a tie that's in style, not a 1982 tie, but a 2018 tie. Make sure you've got that on. Make sure your suit looks good. Make sure you put the little accessories on there to make it pop. And if you're in a formal church and you wear a robe, you wear the garments of your denomination, make sure those things are pressed. Make sure they're wrinkle-free. Make sure that they're fit you well. They don't be baggy. It doesn't look like you had your dad's robe on. Make sure it fits you and it looks good. You know, they always say, never judge a book by its cover. The reason we say that is because people judge books by their cover. That's why clickbait works on YouTube, doesn't it? Before I get to the 5th point, which I think is probably the primary biggest mistake that we don't make, I want to say that I thank you for watching this video. I want to encourage you to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And each week we'll be doing videos, more videos on taking smaller churches and develop them into large churches, taking a bivocational pastor or minister and bringing them to full-time. We're going to give you tips and tricks on how we've done that, and we're going to teach you and show you the things we've learned over some time to develop a larger church. Now, if you're watching and you say, well, I've got some things I'd like to hear about, well, drop those in the comments and say, hey, do a video on this. Whatever it is, we'll be glad to do it. All right, number 5. Number 5 is important. It's super important. It's the most important. And that is be animated in your service. I tell you this, man, the more animated you are, the more engaged I am. You see, when you're passionate about what you're presenting to me, I have a tendency to get passionate with you about it. If you're humdrum, standing behind the lectern or the pulpit or the table or whatever it is you speak behind, if you stay right there and your hand movements are very, very nominal, your expressions are the same, your voice is monotone, your pitch stays the same the entire time, man, you can take a great speech, a great message, and kill it right there. Every great communicator that we've ever seen, whether they're politicians, teachers, communicators of the gospel, whatever, every one of them was animated in the way they presented their message to the people. And so when you stand up, be animated. Be excited. Smile at me. Talk to me in a way that makes me know that you're excited about what you're communicating. Because the more excited you get about it, the more passionate you are about it, the more passionate I am. I challenge you, go find the best preachers, the preachers you think, man, this guy's the best. I love hearing this guy. I love hearing this person. I love to go see them. I love their ministry. Go check them out and watch how they communicate. Watch their hand motions. Watch their movements on the platform. Watch how they interact with the people. Watch their animation. It's important to be animated. All right, guys, listen. I don't care if you're watching this video on Monday. I don't care if you're watching it on Wednesday. I don't care if you're watching it on Saturday. If you will shorten your sermon, if you will get to the point, if you will not read your message, if you will look sharp and be more animated behind the pulpit, I promise you, you'll preach a better sermon. All right, guys, we'll talk to you next week. Remember, like and subscribe, comment in the comments, anything you can add, some other tips that would make you preach better, and let me know what you want to see future videos on. Thank you.